Wow. Hello, everybody. You all look fantastic. It is so exciting to be here with you this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming along today, braving the weather and the elements and being with us here this afternoon. My name is Noah Schultz-Byard. I'm a director at the independent think tank, the Australia Institute. Woo! Australia Institute. Thank you for that. That's very kind. But before we begin today, could you please help me in welcoming to the stage a world-renowned performer and cultural ambassador of Ngarrindjeri arts, crafts, martial arts and traditional culture, Uncle Major Moogie Sumner, for a welcome to country.
Before we start, I'd like to invite our ancestors here to be with us. My ancestors, your ancestors, wherever you come from. Invite them here to come and sit down next to you, to be a part of this meeting, this gathering, to be here to look after us. Walkandi, Rikai, Rumai, Alka. Ngarrindjeri pakanamutana, Ngarrindjeri pangari, lemon ganu lu. Ngarrindjeri pakanamutana, Ngarrindjeri pangari, lemon ganu lu. Ngarrindjeri pakanamutana, lemon ganu lu. Ngarrindjeri pakanamutana, Ngarrindjeri pangari, lemon ganu lu. What I said, I asked the ancestors from the four directions to come here and sit down in the land of the Ghana people, the land of my mother. The song was to welcome you and your ancestors here to this land. The words at the end was asking them to take away any negative energy that attaches itself to us as we travel across the land. Ask them to take that away so that we have a good day here today. Have a good meeting. But most of all, look after each other. On behalf of me and my mother's people, the Ghana people, I welcome you and your ancestors here to this land. And thank you all for coming. Thank you.
thank you, Uncle Moogie. It's always such an honour to hear your welcome and the warm spirit in which you welcome people to the land. It's a great honour. I'm also pleased to announce today that our media partner for this event is The Point, as you can see there. The Point is a new initiative of ours at the Australia Institute, and in some ways it is a reaction to the current parlous state of the media in this country. The Point is a... I agree. So it's a place where you can find research, explainers, opinions, and fact checks from leading experts in their field. If you enjoy the conversations that we have today at this event, I guarantee you will love thepoint.com.au. Check it out. Let's make the national conversation better. But now, onto our session. I'm so thankful that our panelists are here with us today, but I'm also really thankful that we're all here and that you're here today. You know, this event wasn't meant to happen, at least in this format, in this place, at this time. But from the collapse of Riders' Week, something new has emerged. And a lot like how after a fire rips through a forest, green shoots can emerge, we're here today. You're all part of a community that has said that these conversations are important. And no matter how much some people in positions of power would like to silence the voices, they can't stop the conversations from happening. So I would like to give a big round of applause to you. Thank you. But onto our session today. Like I said, I'm thrilled to be joined by three friends that we have here today. On the panel, we have Dr. Bob Brown. Bob... Bob is an environmentalist, a doctor, an environmental campaigner, and the former parliamentary leader of the Australian Greens, the party which he co-founded. He's the founder of the Bob Brown Foundation, a not-for-profit organisation which works to protect nature through direct action, legal defence and science. But crucially for today's session, Bob is also the author of Defiance, a book that looks at the stories of nature and its defenders. Thank you for being with us, Bob. We're also joined today by Hannah Ferguson. Hannah is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Cheek Media Co. and a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree. She is the co-host of the news and pop culture broadcast Big Small Talk. Hannah has a Bachelor of Laws and a Master's of Writing, Editing and Publishing from the University of Queensland. Hannah is also the author of Taboo, Conversations We Never Had About Sex, Body Image, Work and Relationships. Thank you for being here, Hannah. We're also thrilled to be joined by Dominic Guerrera. Dominic is a Ngarrindjeri and Kaurna poet, writer, artist, and curator who resides on Kaurna Yatta. His writings have been published in ArtLink and Debris magazine. He was the recipient of the 2021 Udjuru Nunakul Indigenous Poetry Prize and the 2024 David Uniton Prize. He is a First Nations literary editor at Cordite Review, and Dominic is also a contributor to and co-editor of The Rocks Remain, which is a curated collection of 25 Aboriginal writers where voices of new and emerging writers are intertwined with artists of renown. Thank you, Dominic, for being with us today. We're here today to talk about storytelling and the bravery that is required to tell the stories that matter. Our authors are all very different. They have different experiences, they write in different formats, they have different perspectives. But one thing that they do is that they tell stories and help us to see the world as it is and how it could be. To do that requires conviction and bravery because it involves standing up to established dominant narratives that need to change to make this country and this world a better place. So while they're all very different, they carry that same burden and responsibility on their shoulders as they write their works. To start us off today, I wanted to ask Hannah, in your book, Taboo, you tackle a broad range of these entrenched dominant narratives, and you do it at times from a deeply personal space. You talk openly about subjects like body image, sex and money. What drove you to write such a personal book, and what do you hope people get out of it?
Well, I just wanted to start by saying it's so lovely to be in Adelaide with you all on this Sunday afternoon. I want to thank Noah and the Australia Institute for pulling together such an amazing afternoon with Yanis in the face of such suppression and racism that has been led by the state premier here. And it's an honour, so thank you so much. I think that, I am a member of Generation Z. I'm a 27-year-old woman in Australia who grew up in a rural conservative town in New South Wales. And when I got to university, I was frustrated that the power systems in this country were dominated by a very narrow viewpoint of a very narrow education and pathway and privilege that I didn't reflect, and I learned that very quickly at law school. So I founded a progressive platform online that at 22 years old, it was kind of crazy that I was going out and saying, I want Rupert Murdoch to hate me. Like my life goal is for Rupert Murdoch to know me and to hate me.
A very valid objective.
Thank
Good
you,
on
thank
you.
you. I don't know what gave a 22-year-old from Orange the confidence to say that, but I was determined. And by the time I was 27, actually 26 at the last federal election, my platform was viewed by 12 million Australians the week before the federal election. And my pride in doing that was that I was challenging the Murdoch narratives which dominated the political landscape in the lead up to the election, and I sold thousands and thousands of t-shirts that said good morning to everyone except Peter Dutton. And I was very proud to have done that. But I also knew that as a 27-year-old woman who was in the political arena, that I was going to be destroyed by Murdoch, by the right, for everything I said and everything I didn't say. And what better way to combat that than to write a book for young women telling them never to be ashamed of their own bodies, their own experiences, and to share mine, because that eliminates the power for Murdoch to do it for me. It removes all of that. And I do want to pursue a career in politics. I do want to challenge. I want to, run at the next federal election as an independent before I turn 30. And that's, again, another crazy set of goals. But if I've written a book where I tell women there is nothing to be ashamed of about our experiences and to be vulnerable myself, I remove the power for the right to do that to me. And I think that that's ultimately given me so much freedom and liberation to continue in the work I do, and hopefully to encourage others to do the same.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. That's fantastic. I hope there are young people in the audience who are inspired by that. It's fantastic. Bob, your book Defiance opens with a foreword by Geraldine Brooks. The opening couple of sentences I just wanted to read here for the audience. When Bob Brown was in Risdon prison for protesting the damming of the Franklin River, the prison authorities wouldn't let him have a copy of Henry David Thoreau's essay on civil disobedience. The jailers were afraid of the power of words. Here, in his book Defiance, Bob Brown gives them something new to fear. So I wanted to ask Bob, is that why you wrote this book? Was it to give the plunderers and the oligarchs of this world something new to fear?
Well, yes, it is, because two things. Firstly, we're a largely compliant human population of nearly 9 billion people in a world that's remarkably dangerously close to ending life on Earth. And the events of the last 24 hours demonstrate that. I must say, though, before I go on to that I'm delighted to be here on this stage in the Adelaide Town Hall, because here in 1897 sang Amy Sherwin, the Taylor Swift of the age. She came out of the bush in Tasmania and was prima donna absoluta of the singing world, and the crowds outside halted her entry in, and she received encore after encore before going on to, well, she'd been to Boston and Milan and so on, and she'd been wiped out of history. But last weekend we got her marble statue, the first statue of a woman, placed in Hobart. So when you come down to see Hadley's Hotel and see our Amy. That said, look, we need to be defiant, and at the front I've got the quote from the great peace activist of the 1970s saying that the trouble with the world isn't civil disobedience, it's civil obedience. Got to think about that we're all too compliant. And further into the book, of course, the old adage that all evil needs to flourish is for good people to do nothing. And we've got to get out of that. And by the way, I've found that becoming active in confronting the destruction of the environment as well as social justice issues is very, very rewarding. And I don't know of anybody who's come out of the Franklin blockade who was arrested and there in prison. There were 250 with me in Risdon prison when they refused that Thoreau book coming in, who hasn't said it was a defining thing in their life, and they're so glad they did it. Anyway, defiance is really important, and it's got to be intelligent defiance. But we need to be able to stand up to people who are, in my case, destroying the environment, and we've done just that. And that might mean that you're threatened. I have to tell you, Noah, that you're speaking to a criminal. I've been convicted of standing in front of a tree, which is a crime in Tasmania, and I'll be appealing that conviction on. I'm a policeman's son. I tried to abide by the law, but you know, when the law is wrong, and it's not me saying this, it's in the book, it's a whole series of American presidents saying this, you have to stand against it. And the law of nature says that we human beings have to live within the bounds of this beautiful little planet of ours. There's no one else, nowhere else, no other place in the universe is going to save us. And at the moment, we're destroying it at the greatest rate in history, and that has to stop. So I'll be very pleased, Paul, my partner Paul's here, shut your ears. They're logging more at the Swift Parrot Forest in Tasmania, and I'll be very pleased to be in my tent and up there with fellow forest defenders in the coming months again.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bob. Dominic, in The Rocks Remain, like I said, you brought together 25 Aboriginal artists and writers to create this collection, and it's a mixture of new and emerging talent and those who are established. When we were talking about the book previously, you said that you wanted it to show the diversity in First Nations literature. What do you hope people will take away from reading the book and seeing that diversity?
No, you're right. We can share. The Rocks Remain, sorry, I have a loud voice, so I'll hold it out here. The Rocks Remain actually came about because a local publisher, Michael Boland at Wakefield Press, wanted to have more Aboriginal voices within his publishing house and approached Ren Wild about putting together the anthology. And then we were able to shape it. And when Ren and I were working on this, we made sure that we didn't want to just have the established writers, because they have their opportunities, they have their places to be able to put their work, promote their work. But we also, we wanted to put established voices alongside emerging voices. So when selecting the works, we had to make sure that we were balancing out. There were people who were established that we had to say no to make sure emerging voices were there. But we also wanted to make sure that there was a diverse amount of writing. So it wasn't just poetry, there's also art writing, and there's also short fiction. very rarely does this opportunity arise for Aboriginal writers here in Adelaide. It's the Aboriginal writing, when you look at who is publishing and publishing frequently in Aboriginal literature, it is a lot of Eastern State Aboriginal writers. And we get it, that's where the industries lie and the populations. But we also have incredible writers here. You know, we have Ali Cobby Eckerman, Natalie Harkin, Ren Wild, Jared Thomas. You know, these are people who we're hitting well above our weight in what we're putting out. But we also had this really rapidly forming, emerging writing scene that I was lucky to be a part of, and I still feel that it's brewing. And this really represented a caption of time of those writers. And now a lot of the emerging writers are published a lot more outside of South Australia, are being invited to be a part of poetry festivals across the country. And not to say that we're responsible for that, but we were able to capture that moment and also help propel some people as well.
Oh, fantastic. It's a beautiful piece of work. You should be very proud. Hannah, you spend a lot of time in places where women, and especially young women, aren't always made to feel welcome. An example of that innate hostility, I think we could call it, came out this week when the Prime Minister called former Australian of the Year, Grace Tame, difficult. Correct. Yes, I couldn't agree more. Hannah, have you ever been called difficult? And
I am.
And how do you navigate those spaces?
I think, you know, the last week to me has been our Prime Minister's true colours. I think Anthony Albanese has been incredibly effective in coming across as kind of daggy dad. And I think the last week has shown the kind of snark and the kind of I see him as morally void. I think he started out when he was elected, oh sorry, thank you to that one man, thank you. I live in Anthony Albanese's electorate, he is my MP, and when he became Prime Minister in 2022, I was really looking forward to seeing positive progressive changes the Labor Party claims to be capable of. And I think they have, for the last, 1.5 terms, sat on being better than the other guy. And they are resting on that, even though our country gave him the keys at the last federal election and said, go for it, we're hopeful, do something. And for him to turn around in the last week and have a crack at David Pocock and Grace Tame, you could not be further departed from the reality of Australians to do that. The only other thing I wanted to add there, there's blatant misogyny in having a crack at, Grace Tame, a woman who has, spent her entire life fighting for the rights and safety of children. There is such a misogyny to that. But I think that it speaks to the kind of action and inaction that he has been, the perpetrator of as the leader of the Labor Party for the last, few years now. And for me, it is this clear indicator that he is not someone who is principled. He is someone that is just following where the conversation goes and contorting himself to the people he is desperate to impress. And right now, that's the right wing in this country and News Corp, and it is devastating. It is devastating because I think no matter in this room if you agree with everything Grace Tame said or if you agree with the Labor Party or who you voted for, I think that it's inherently Australian to be able to detect a person that is disingenuous from any side. I think what we look for is someone who stands by their principles even when we may disagree with them. And Albo has been nothing but disappointing and a betrayal of the values he claimed to have. And that's my frustration.
Thank you. Bob, defiance and defending nature, it isn't easy and it isn't always safe. You've been arrested you've been vilified, and you've been celebrated, often all at the same time. It's a pretty wild ride to have all of this pressure and obligation as a defender, but it's not always safe. On that note, you referred to it briefly before, you have to leave here after our intermission and get on a plane and fly back to Tasmania in an urgent rush. Can you tell us a little bit about what appointment you have there and what it takes to defend the forest?
Yes, thanks, Noah. 30 years ago, almost to the day, I was at Farmhouse Creek in the forest of Tasmania, and I was a member of Parliament, a Greens member of the Tasmanian Parliament, when some guys came past, got out a gun and shot at me and two others, and there was a journalist from Vietnam there, and he dropped straight into the ground. Anyway, we had the car number, and they took that number, and finally these guys were arraigned before the courts and were fined $100 to $200 for shooting on a Sunday. There's a great difference between how people who want to change the world for the better are treated and those who want to keep the power and the misappropriation which is currently there. I'm going back to a court in the morning. I'm appealing against being arrested in front of a tree, in front of a forest which had swift parrots in it. And the law in Tasmania says if there's a report, no qualifications, that swift parrots are present, they must stop logging within 500 metres. And Jenny Webber from our foundation was there that morning. We'd written to the Premier, forest authorities, and said there's swift parrots in that coop. Swift parrots, 3,000 of them between here and Sydney in 1980. There were tens of thousands before that. They come to the mainland for winter, they go to Tasmania to breed in summer. They're down to 300. It's estimated there'll be 70 by 3 years from now. And that's because we're destroying the nesting sites in Tasmania by logging. And so we have gone in there to defend the swift parrots, and Jenny said there's lots of swift parrots here. They took no notice of her. We'd written to the Premier and told him that, and came over to me and said, are you going to move? And I said, no. There's swift parrots here, and you mustn't log where the swift parrot. Anyway, the magistrate found that though we had told the authorities the swift parrots were present, Jenny had spoken in too light-hearted a voice, and I'd been too argumentative. And the single judge in the Supreme Court of Tasmania found the same, endorsed that. So we're before the full bench of the Supreme Court tomorrow, just to get common sense brought in to the application of the law as against the power of the elite logging industry and its associates in Tasmania, which seems to infect all corners of decision making. I'm very happy to be there. I'm not. My dad was a policeman. He locked me up in a cell when I was 6. He was a good fellow. I wasn't frightened at all for not eating spinach. And I've got, I'm not worried about, by the way, I found that people who'd been to boarding school do better in jail than other people. I also came out of jail in the Franklin campaign and went into Parliament, and I can report that jail was a far friendlier place. But I'm now headed to court tomorrow. It'll go for a day or two, and we'll see what happens. It is, however, as with the suffragettes who inspire me every day of the week, you have to defy what's going on at the time, and even the laws of the time, which said that women can't vote, if you're going to change the world to be better. And at my end of age, I couldn't be happier. I'm full of beans about with the terrific lot of people who go out into the forests of Tasmania and get arrested, and elsewhere, right across Australia, and elsewhere around the world, where 250 environmentalists were murdered last year. We don't have that rate going on here in Australia, so we're very free to go out there. Gets cold sometimes, gets wet sometimes, the soup's not always hot, but it's a great experience to come back knowing. And I'll finish by saying in the Tarkine, they wanted to log 3,600 hectares of that magnificent rainforest and its wildlife. in 2019. So far they've managed to log 58 hectares, and 3,442 hectares is safe because people went out there and defied the law.
Well, good on you, Bob. And it's interesting that you said that you were in part arrested for being too argumentative. If you keep that up, you'll be at risk of being called difficult too at some stage soon. But the best type of difficult, so good on you. Dominic, your piece in The Rocks Remain, it's titled Unwelcome to Country. You conclude that piece by saying, "It's time to bring forth a future that doesn't centre this continent on white lies, where Aboriginal lives are valued and celebrated, where we can live full and healthy lives. But until then, consider yourself unwelcome to country." I wanted to acknowledge that I think it takes bravery to stand up to established narratives like that, to put it in black and white on paper, and you've shown that bravery well in the piece. But can I ask you to reflect on your writing and the role that bravery plays in the type of storytelling you do through your writing and through your curatorial work?
One thing and this is no slide at you, but I think we have to be cautious to say that it's revealing to see the Prime Minister's misogyny when it's a white woman that he's speaking about, when the Labor government and the Labor Party have been misogynistic towards Aboriginal women for decades and towards refugee and asylum seeker women. For me, the writing has been on the wall for a long time with that party and Anthony Albanese. And the Northern Territory intervention that's been upheld by 3 prime ministers of the Labor Party. The treatment of women who are seeking asylum. We love to use, international women's brown women's stories of suffrage from overseas, and they come here and they seek safe harbour in Australia. But we forget about the violence that is happening towards brown women here, and the violence that happens to those brown women when they want to come to Australia. So I just wanted to say that, but it's, and Grace is amazing. I think Grace is a great person and public figure and doing incredible work. But it's often, when it happens to a white woman, then it becomes revealing. And I think that says something about us, about what we're watching and what we're allowing to slide past in this country. As for the Unwelcome to Country, I actually wrote that poem for Adelaide Writers' Week. So it's funny that you bring it up here. And it was that I was getting so angry and frustrated sitting in parklands after parklands at festivals after festivals and seeing our elders welcoming people, literally giving a cultural act of welcome to our country, even though a lot of you are here uninvited and you've made yourself welcome on our country. And yet there was very little in being, the reciprocal relationship was not there. And it made me very frustrated. So in the poem, I literally invite people to the disparity of wealth, the disabilities, the diseases, all these things. I'm literally welcoming you to them. And what it means to exist as an Aboriginal person in this country. And why our elders are welcoming you. What is entailed in that welcome? I literally was sitting at the back with Uncle Moogie, and he said, your cousin, he's working down at Henley High School with all the Aboriginal kids, but he has all the non-Aboriginal kids there as well. And he goes, and that's how we're going to help end racism. So that's the underpinning, the beauty of someone like Uncle Moogie, who comes out onto the stage hoping that it ends or contributes to the ending of racism in this country. That's a very powerful thing, but there's not a lot being given back to him. And there's not a lot being given back to our elders. So it takes a lot for an Aboriginal person to stand up, and I don't use the word brave, I call it a responsibility to stand up, because if we don't tell our stories, who will? It certainly won't be this colony. I've read the early romancing novelizations of colonization. They're terrible. And it's a responsibility because, like I said, if we don't tell it, no one else will. And so I choose to tell that in the form of poetry.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for the perspective and the honesty and the truth that you bring to your work. It's very valuable. Bob, I was going to ask you, the need to defend nature is seemingly never-ending. It kind of makes me feel like you'll never be out of a job. There'll always be nature that needs defending. Your work carries on to this day through the Bob Brown Foundation, and I wanted to ask you about the case in Tasmania currently, a large mining company that wanted to effectively dump its toxic waste in Takaina, in the Tarkine rainforest, a place of extraordinary national and global world heritage. Could you tell us about where that fight is up to and some of the recent developments?
Yes, well, this is MMG, which is a state-owned Chinese company. Mr. Xi is ultimately in control there. It bought the Rosebery mine in 2009 and immediately found it'll need a new waste repository. It's a very old mine. It's got 2 waste dumps, but it decided to put a cheap pipeline across the Pieman River into the cathedral-like Tarkine rainforest with all its wildlife to put its acid waste there for the next 40 years behind a dam. And 3,000 people came into the forest over the intervening years, including a lot of farmers and doctors and plumbers and nurses and so on. And over 100 were arrested. But just last week, they quietly put up on their website that they're now looking at building a waste dump outside the Tarkine in another place. It's not the best place. The mine next door, Renison, also owned in China, is building a waste depository big enough for all the mines in Western Tasmania, and that's where the pipeline should go. But we've got Murray Watt, who's the Minister missing in action for well, in fact, he's ticking off on every corporate destruction of the environment that you can think of, from coal mines to gas fracking, Indigenous sites going west as well. Look at what's happening in the Pilbara. And he has told us he won't talk with us. He's written and said, I don't have time to talk to you, but he's speaking to every CEO of logging and mining and corporations in the country, and Albo hand-picked him to do that. This is a great act of treachery, or failure of responsibility, I should say, by a national government on the environment. I've never seen that situation in the 55 years I've been involved in lobbying with Canberra. It's worse now than ever before, even though the situation is for the environment has got worse and worse. So we've actually people power there's done the job of the government for them, and they are moving out of Tarkina because Australians came in great numbers and stood up. And it seems that we have to take the action that government won't, whether it's on so many social issues, fairness issues, but ultimately we're here to leave the world the better for us being here. In my lifetime, 3/4 of the world's wildlife has been destroyed, and now it's being destroyed at the greatest rate in history. As I said earlier, women and men and children are being murdered around the world simply for standing up on the environment. And what's our governments doing at state and federal level? They're putting their foot on the accelerator. We've got to pull our belts in. We've got to end this age of growth mania. We've got to be responsible, intelligent human beings overriding our instinct for greed. And we've got to get those people who represent that instinct for greed, who are currently controlling the world, and most of them are men, in office, out. Now, there's only one way for that to happen, and that's for us to take action.
Thank you, Bob. And the work is never done. I'll just plug here, if we can, upcoming, the Bob Brown Foundation has March for Forests, the March in March happening around the country. There is a March for Forests happening here in Adelaide on Sunday the 22nd of March, starting at Tandanyanga, Victoria Square, at midday. So I will see all of you there at midday in Vic Square. That's an extra 1,000 people we've gotten to the march just like that. It's amazing. So thank you everybody for committing to come. And thank you, Bob, for organising.
I can just add there that in January 1983, 6,000 people marched for the Franklin here in Adelaide, a really important part of saving that river. Thank you for that. The Tarkina is your nearest rainforest, so thank you for that little ad, because Adelaide is certainly important to saving that rainforest and passing it on to, well, back to the Aboriginal people of Tasmania, who we aim to put it back into their control. They looked after it for so long. They'll look after it much better than the current bunch of loggers, miners and off-road vehicle wreckers of Indigenous sites. So, yeah, March for the Forest coming up here in Adelaide in March.
Good stuff. Thank you. Hannah, you've said that you want to run for Parliament. You want to run for Parliament as an independent. Good on you. Democracy thrives on high expectation. Democracy relies on people being willing to get involved and put their hand up. So I think there's bravery in running for Parliament, and it's great that we have young people who are willing to do it. But do you ever worry, or do people try to weaponise your work? You know, you speak about true, real things that have happened to you in your life and that can be confronting. How do you think your work will help you or hinder you in a potential run for Parliament?
I like that Bob and I before this were speaking about the fact that sometimes the line between bravery and stupidity is quite small. So having a will to want to enter Parliament with the genuine belief that you could help fix it sometimes feels like a broken dream. I think there's also a conversation to be had about whether sometimes it is more powerful to stand outside of the arena and try to shape what's happening inside, or to want to have a run and actually show people what it could be like, what will happen, what the process looks like. Because I think we need more independent and minor parties in Australian politics to challenge just how broken the major party system is, the two major parties. And unfortunately right now, the strongest force shaping the two-party system is one nation. And that's really, really terrifying. And, you know, I have very close family members who I'm having lots of conversations with at the moment about one nation and their influence. And I think it's so important to stand up to racist sentiment in this country that is growing, because parties like the Labor Party are distracting people and deflecting from their own inaction on things like the cost of living and banking on, you know, individuals like Pauline Hanson and the mainstream media blaming immigrants. And that is deeply racist. So I think it's important to continue to stand up to that and have lots of hard and uncomfortable conversations in our everyday lives to reshape that story. I think at a personal level with the work that I'm doing, again, you know, for me, it can be seen as a chink in the armour to many that I reveal so much of myself to the people that follow me, that have for a few years now. I see it as a strength in many ways, because it's hard to use information against me that I'm not ashamed of. But I also think that there is, you know, something to be said for the fact that you just have to own your story and be upfront, and that's what's missing in politics right now. People fight to conceal parts of themselves and to only, you know, represent those that are lobbying them. And I think from my perspective, it's really important to remain transparent. I have a track record now of 5 years of personal views and experiences that I've shared, and anyone who might consider voting for me, although the Murdoch press will just call me a radical extremist feminist for the rest of my life, and I'm proud of that label because I think it means you're doing something right and standing up for something that you believe in. But I think for me, I'm always going to have people shaping the narratives, like the people on this stage. We all have others shaping who we are and deciding and telling and using language and weaponizing our work against us. But all you can continue to do is step forward, state who you are, state your case, and lean into your views further, because being scared of what they're going to say is not the answer, it's standing up to it.
Dominic, we spoke there about the potential weaponization of writing in Hannah's work, but some of the projects you've worked on, including The Rocks Remain, you've said have been weaponized previously. Can you tell us more about that experience in your work?
I mean, anything that Aboriginal people say publicly can be weaponized. This book, I worked with Ren Wild, who I don't know if a lot of you know, but they actually won the Black and Wright Literature Prize that was administered by the Queensland State Library. They arrived in Brisbane to receive their prize, and when they walked into the building, they were shuffled into a meeting room with the head of the State Library, who had informed them that the arts minister had revoked the prize because of their stance on Palestine. And that was 15 grand. And Ren is a working artist. They don't live on, payments. They literally work from one job to another. And in the aftermath of that, because we won, I actually won an Australian Creative Australia grant to bring this together, and it was $40,000 something. It was in my name. And the media kept perpetuating that Ren had won this Creative Australia grant. And the reason why that is because they want to be able to control, like academic research grants, which is something that Dr. Rando experienced. They want to be able to control who has access to that. They want to remove the panels, the judges who have worked on, reading the applications, putting the work in to choose the right people for the prizes and these creative grants. And they want to have control and input, political control and political input into that. And that is very dangerous because it will shape our cultural institutions and our culture in this country and who can and can't speak. And it removes the element of merit, that you win these prizes based on merit, but now it's going to be based on ideology. And it's the ideology that fits with the current government of the time. And that... So that's extremely dangerous territory, and I think, if anything, we've learnt from Writers' Week and the collapse, I will say, the collapse of 2026 yes. Writers' Week. I really hope it comes back, and it will, because we love our Writers' Week. But is that not just the writers and the chairs and the essay literary community who stood up, but the readers, the people like you who buy books, and like myself, I spend way too much on books. We stood up and we said, no, we're not putting up with this. We're not putting up with it, particularly here in our city. And I think we sent a very resounding message that will strengthen and encourage people like myself who work in the arts to know that the audiences and the artists that we work with will back us up and say no.
Thank you. We are rapidly running out of time. It's terrifying how quickly it moves. I think we've got time for one more question each, but also please feel free to throw in any additional personal reflections that you want to into these questions. But Bob, I wanted to ask you, there are many different forms of storytelling, but one of the most powerful storytellers in this nation is Rupert Murdoch and his news empire. He tells stories every day that shape the way that the country sees itself. You've had many interactions with the hate media, as you've named them. There's even a chapter in your book called Rupert, a lovely dedication, I feel. How do powerful people like Rupert and his cronies take it when you stand up to them, as you have in the past?
Well, of course they don't like it, and I, during my Senate years, offered to debate with Rupert when he came out and said, "Oh God, don't let the Greens near the economy," and he wouldn't do that. Archbishop Pell wouldn't either. But you see, there's a very wealthy, powerful, wielding fellow who's turned his news organs into opinion makers, which don't carry the news but carry his philosophy as to how the world should be wrong. And it's a great injustice to a democracy or to any society that they're not getting balanced news, but they are getting propagandised effectively. And the Australian newspaper is a champion at that. I'm sure the Advertiser does its best as well. But yes, I took the Murdoch media on when I was in the Senate, and all hell broke loose. One commentator here in Adelaide called me a son of a bitch, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, for simply taking on the Murdoch media. I was threatened with all sorts of things, but you know, it is our responsibility to take on the organs of propaganda that have us really subscribing to a world in which 1% of the people hold 50% of the wealth, and the other 99% hold 50% of the wealth. You know, there's 2,500 times as much wealth in the billionaires as there are in the rest of the people, and it is manifestly wrong that there is such poverty and disgusting deprivation of rights around the planet while these billionaires rule. We're run by a plutocracy, by the rule of the rich. There's more billionaires in Beijing, communist Beijing now, than there are in New York. Same lot. And there's the great dilemma, because this planet's not going to survive those people. They are lacking in empathy. Whether it's Trump or Putin or Xi or Modi, they're lacking in empathy, which is the ability to relate not just to other human beings, but to our fellow creatures who are so important to our soul, to our makeup as human beings, to our delight in being alive on this natural planet. And in particular, they don't empathise with those who are coming after us. As the great Tasmanian environmentalist and poet Olagus Trahanas said, we need to pass on the world the better for us being here. In fact, John F. Kennedy said it earlier. And the key to this is not to get depressed, but to get active. And the key to it is not to shrug the shoulders and say, I can't be part of it, because all of us are equally part of it. And the key to it is, if we do have wealth, is to share that wealth by subsidising campaigners who are out there doing what some of us feel we can't do. And the reward is in knowing that we are changing the world for the better. And as the suffragettes did, against the odds, many of them didn't live to see the outcome, making the world a better place for those who come after it. It's a great feeling. I know through my own life, sitting back and thinking about it all and cogitating and so on, gets to be bleak in the long run. So I patted the veranda post twice at my old home in the bush in Tasmania and decided to go out there and get involved. And I've never been happier, because running into my partner Paul enhanced that right down the line. But the message to young people now is go for it and have fun while you're doing it. Don't get overtaken by anxiety. Have fun. Don't get depressed. Get active.
Good on you. Thank you. Hannah, a final question to you. I feel at the core of a lot of your writing is analysing the nexus between shame and power, how the two are connected, and how we internalise so many stories about them without even realising. I wanted to ask, has writing about these themes changed the way you view your own power?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, you know, what people get wrong about shame a lot of the time is that they think it's the same as guilt. Guilt is when you've done something wrong and you might feel that you need to take responsibility and accountability for something, but shame is much more of a sort of insidious, like, festering of not only have I done something wrong, but I am wrong. And shame is created and weaponized by, the Murdoch media in many ways to make a lot of people, a lot of minority groups feel that their identity, their experiences are somehow something to be ashamed of. And this, can span from things like, the community you come from to, maybe who you love. Like there's so many different aspects of how shame can manifest too. But what we've got to remember is that shame is not an emotion that any of us should ever feel. It is completely useless. The idea that we are fundamentally wrong or broken. And what's ironic in all of this is that guilt is something that probably the Murdoch media should feel a bit more. I would like a lot of people to take on. I think guilt is an important emotion, that when we're all going to fuck up, We are all going to make mistakes in our life and do wrong by people. We are all going to cause harm in some way or another. I'd much rather cause harm by maybe accidentally having a fight with my little sister than, creating propaganda to destroy the planet. And I think that when we think about shame and the way that it's weaponized by power structures and by people that sit at the top of those, and we begin to look a bit deeper as to how they manifest and how they're projected onto us, it's little things. The way that the word woke has been used by the Murdoch media, which simply means to have empathy, to care, to give a shit, to take action. We think about the fact that that is demonized as something that is, radical and outrageous. There are all these little moments that build up to create shame at the heart of a belief system which simply values human rights, expression, and empathy. I think that when you start interrogating that in your personal life and realizing that when you share, you sort of suffocate shame of its ability to take hold, everything changes from that moment forward.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And Dominic, I wanted to draw the audience's attention. You were a co-curator of what I think is a rather extraordinary exhibition that's on right now as a part of the Adelaide Festival. It's called Kumarank, and absolutely. It's a series of paintings and wireworks, and through them the exhibition retells the story of the building of the bridge to Hindmarsh Island, or Kumarank, and the resistance of the Ngarrindjeri women and their allies. I was lucky to see it last weekend. I highly recommend it to anyone who is able to see it. It's an important, powerful piece of work. It's also infuriating, the way that it lays out the injustice that was visited upon these women in this community. But I wanted to ask you, through work such as curating Kumarank, how do you balance beauty and protest at the same time in making works like this?
I mean, there is beauty in protest, because if it's protest that's centered around humanity and environmentalism and the protecting of those things, that is the beauty of it. I'm also fortunate that there's also culture that's present in that exhibition, and there's the story of these women. And it's been, I guess this is something that as a curator and as an artist, I try not to put too much on the outcome, but rather putting the emphasis on the work and allowing the audience to experience the work themselves. Because I'm never going to be able to control how someone experiences my work. With the women, we spent a lot of time talking about creating these works, and one of the things that radiated through all of those artists, and we're dealing with Auntie Sandra Saunders and Auntie Ellen, who were there, and Auntie Betty Sumner, who's Uncle Moogie's sister, and young women who weren't even born at the time of some of this happening. And they all wanted to radiate the love that they had for the women who were the older women who were there and who are no longer with us. And I think that that's something that, there's this footage of the women that we played at the community reunion, and it's Annie Dot Shaw singing her song, and it's all the old women who have passed now sitting with her, and they're just weaving, and they're singing the song all together. That's both protest, resistance, but it's also, it's fucking beautiful, And that's the moments that I live for in working in this space, because it was far more powerful to do that. The Haimash Island Bridge is a story that has actually been forgotten in a lot of ways. It was just as big in the media, and we're talking a South Australian story that had national coverage. Was the top story on any night that something came out, was the front page. And yet it's been in a way erased and forgotten from our kind of collective memory. And it's only through things like this project that it kind of comes back to the forefront. And this is going to be a form of justice for these women, because they're getting to tell their story on their terms. And lastly, we've got a documentary coming out in October for the Adelaide Film Festival, and then we have a theatre and cultural immersive experience for the Adelaide Festival next year down in Goolwa on the river. So we're coming back to country, and we're bringing the justice directly to that bridge. Oh. The exhibition is on at Ace Gallery, which is next to Jam Factory behind Mercury in that little courtyard, Tuesday to Saturday. And it usually opens after 10 o'clock, like good art galleries do.
And it's running until the 4th of April, so please do get along to see that. Thank you, Dominic. Well, I'm sorry to say that's all we have time for today. And before we say our final thank yous and head to an intermission, I did need to make a few quick announcements, and I also wanted to share a quick video with you all. The Australia Institute is proud to be one of the most trusted and influential public policy think tanks in the country. We're proud of producing research that matters, that has a high impact. And our greatest strength is our independence, the independence to do the research that we need to do and publish it. But our independence is only possible because of the support of people like you, coming to events like this. Thank you so much for the support. We have prepared a short video to showcase some of the impact that you've helped make possible. So please, if we could take that away.
A think tank, a group, looking at the overarching principles. One of the things that makes it special is that it encompasses all the issues confronting Australia.
The Australia Institute, it's revealed that 2/3 of people in this country believe corruption is common.
The Australia Institute shows 90% support for rules around truth in political advertising.
Well, more than half of the gas exported from Australia is royalty-free, according to research from think tank the Australia Institute.
The Australia Institute.
The Australia Institute.
The Australia Institute.
In Norway, they tax their fossil fuel industry and give their kids free university education. In Australia, we subsidise the fossil fuel industry and we charge our kids a fortune to go to uni. Tell me politics is boring.
The question isn't whether Australia has the capacity to lead with integrity. The question is whether the people in this building have the courage to do it.
Poverty is a policy choice. These are things that can be addressed. We know how to do them.
We do have the right to have some hubris because we should all be hoping for better.
Industry in Australia, households in Australia want cheaper gas. All Labor have to do is make one group sad, the foreign-owned gas industry.
We can have a really big influence on rebuilding or building the institutions of international law after Donald Trump has dismantled them.
This great submarine deal is almost certainly going to result in us having no submarines. It's a terrible, terrible mistake.
Government has to change its view.
Destruction of native forests.
Australia is one of the biggest consumers of fashion per capita in the world.
Climate integrity.
A whistleblower protection authority.
Record profits and price gouging.
To have institutions like the Australia Institute doing original research that underpins the arguments of those who want to reconstitute the dream of democracy, that is the greatest gift to anyone who wants to keep the idea of democracy alive.
Thank you, everybody. It's an honour to work at the Australia Institute, and if you would like to support our work, I would encourage you to speak with my colleague Vikram, who is here today in the white shirt. He'll be out in the foyer in a couple of minutes and would be thrilled to speak to you about what your donation could do for us and our work at the Institute. The donations are tax deductible, and we would really appreciate the support. So we are going into an intermission now. That intermission will be around 35 to 40 minutes. There are books available for purchase in the foyer, and excitingly, all of our panelists will be departing the stage now and heading to a signing area where you'll be able to meet them and get your books signed. Please come back into the auditorium at 2:45, where our second panel will be taking place. That second panel is Resistance from Authoritarian to Colonialism with Yanis Varoufakis, who you just saw on our amazing video, and Professor Clare Wright, hosted by my colleague, Dr. Emma Shortis. We will start at 2:45 sharp, so please be back here. There are bars where you can get yourself a refreshment on either side, so you can leave through the side doors or the foyer entrance that you came through. You're also very welcome to remain in your seats and rest. The areas around the auditorium will get very busy, so please, if you would like to, go and buy a book, get your signature, get a drink, and then make your way back into the auditorium. But we'll go into the intermission now, so can I please just have one final round of applause for our amazing guests. Thank you all. Stay safe and look after one another. Have a good day.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to keep up to date with all our latest research and work, sign up to our newsletter. Delivered every fortnight, it includes behind-the-scenes updates from Richard Dennis, an exclusive cartoon from Judy Horacek, details for our upcoming events and webinars, as well as explainers, graphs, and not to mention the latest cutting-edge research and analysis from the team here on the key issues that are facing Australia. Click the button on your screen to check it out.